What's up everybody, Bandit here. Now a question I get a lot is, if you're going to buy a new truck, which engine option should you choose? Should you get the smaller engine option, or should you go ahead, pay a little bit extra money and go with the larger engine? Now I will go ahead and start off the bat with, if you're going to be towing or hauling a lot, you're definitely going to want to go with that larger engine option, really no matter what truck you're looking for. So, you know, in your Tacomas, you can either get a 2.7 liter 4-cylinder or the 3.5 liter V6. And again, if you're going to weigh it down at all, the V6 does seem a lot happier dealing with those a little bit larger loads, and you're not going to be straining your engine quite as much, and in general they probably will last a little bit longer. Now this isn't always the case, but it seems like most manufacturers are going with the thought that a smaller engine will inherently get better fuel economy. You see this with Ford already with their EcoBoost lineup, and we heard a rumor a few weeks ago with Ram. Whether this rumor proves to be true or not remains to be seen, but what they were talking about is getting rid of their 5.7 liter V8 with their half-ton trucks and going with a boosted V6, something with a turbo, in other words. Now, they were also talking about getting rid of their Pentastar V6 and going with an inline 4 with a turbo. So again, all that remains to be seen, but it seems like a lot of auto manufacturers are going this direction. But this isn't always the case. I remember growing up, my granddad had two basically identical trucks. What they were the Dodge Dakotas from the late 90s and early 2000s, but one did have the V6 Magnum with the standard transmission. The other one had a V8 Magnum with the standard transmission. And actually, just him going around town and everything else, he was able to achieve a little bit better fuel economy with that V8. The reason for that is he was able to drive around in a little bit lower gear. So in other words, instead of driving around in third, he could drive around in fourth. And since that V8 made torque a little bit lower in the RPM range, he had equal power and was able to not stress the engine quite as much and squeeze a little bit better fuel economy out of that. Now, another example when this doesn't always ring true with the smaller engine getting the better fuel economy is a case with Ford's EcoBoost motor, actually. Now, last summer I worked with a guy who had a fairly new EcoBoost. I believe it was 2014, and on his highway commute every day he got between 15 to 16 miles per gallon. Now, personally, I was expecting the EcoBoost to do a little bit better in that half-ton truck. You know, I wouldn't think it'd be too taxed, and you know, he wasn't really going too fast down the interstate, so that seemed like a pretty low fuel economy number to me. Now, yesterday I was able to drive my dad's Tahoe a little bit, and this is what I found. So looking here at your average economy, again, I did reset this before yesterday, and now we are at 18.5 miles per gallon. Now, obviously the Tahoe is built on more or less the Chevy 1500 frame, and it does have the 5.3 liter V8. Now, that small block Chevy has been used for a long time there in a lot of GM products, and in this particular example it is mated with just a standard 6-speed automatic. Now, with this Chevrolet motor, it is able to go down into a cylinder deactivation mode, meaning when the motor is not taxed too much, it can not basically run a few cylinders and drop down into a 4-cylinder mode in hopes of saving a little bit of fuel economy. Now, in my run, it does tell you what mode it's in, whether it's in 4-cylinder or 8-cylinder mode, and we were in 8-cylinder mode basically the entire time. But I thought these were pretty respectable numbers. Now, obviously the 8-cylinder should be a little bit heavier than the 6-cylinder, and we're not exactly comparing apples to apples since one's Ford and one's GM, but more or less that is the moral of the story. You know, the V8, I guess, was not being taxed quite as much and achieving a little bit better fuel economy. Now, a lot of times the smaller engine is more efficient. Now, if you would look at a Ram 1500 with that Pentastar V6 and compare that with a Ram 1500 with the SRT 10 package, you know, with that Viper V10 in it, obviously the V6 is going to be a lot more fuel efficient. However, that really isn't the whole equation, and there are other things to consider as well. For one thing, if you do get a turbo motor, a lot of times you will have a higher cost of ownership, both with the repair costs if something would happen to go wrong, also with the fact that you have to run premium fuel in those to get a little bit higher octane out of your fuel. So ultimately, do smaller engines get better fuel economy? The answer is sometimes. You know, it really depends on how the manufacturer puts the vehicle together and all of the components that they use. You know, between the transmission, the rear end in the vehicle, and the engine. Just looking at one of those pieces is not the entire puzzle, and you have to consider all of it to really get a good idea of what's going on. So I hope this video did help you out. Please, as always, leave all of your thoughts, comments, and personal experiences in the comments below. We do love to see those, and hopefully we can get some good discussions started down there. Thank you all very much for watching. Have a fantastic week, everybody. We'll catch you next time.